The harsh winter wind howled through the Montana mountains as Nathan Parker's SUV crawled up the narrow road. As a best-selling thriller author facing writer's block and burnout, he'd convinced himself that 2 weeks in this remote cabin would help him meet his next deadline. His agent had called him crazy for disappearing in the middle of negotiations for a TV adaptation, but Nathan needed space to think. The cabin emerged from the darkness like a mirage, its windows glowing with warm light. Nathan frowned. He'd specifically chosen this location for its isolation, and the rental company had assured him the power would need to be activated upon arrival. Something wasn't right. He parked and grabbed the emergency flashlight from his glove compartment. The porch steps creaked under his feet as he approached the door, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Before he could reach for his keys, the door swung open. Nathan stumbled backward. In the doorway stood the most striking woman he'd ever seen. Her skin had an otherworldly silver sheen, like moonlight on water. Her hair was pure white, floating around her head as if suspended in zero gravity. But it was her eyes that held him captive. They were entirely black, with points of light that seemed to mirror the night sky. "You're right on time," she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. "I've been waiting." Nathan's writer's mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. There must be some mistake. "I rented this cabin for the next 2 weeks. She smiled, revealing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. "No mistake. I'm Riley, and you're Nathan Parker, the author who thinks hiding in the mountains will fix his writer's block." His hand tightened on the flashlight. "How do you know my name?" "The same way I know you've been dreaming about stars falling upward and hearing songs in languages that don't exist." She stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "Come in. It's time we talked about why you're really here." Nathan knew he should leave. Drive back down the mountain, call the rental company, demand a refund. Instead, he found himself stepping over the threshold, drawn by an inexplicable sense of recognition. The cabin's interior was cozy but strange. Conventional furniture mixed with objects he couldn't identify, crystals that pulsed with inner light, metallic spheres that hovered inches above surfaces, and what looked like a star map projected onto one wall, showing constellations he'd never seen. "What are you?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Riley settled into an armchair, her movements too fluid to be human. "I'm a sentinel from the Valaris system. And you, Nathan Parker, are my assigned mate." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Right. And I'm secretly a unicorn." "Your skepticism is expected," she said, "but it doesn't change the truth. For centuries, my people have been connecting with humans who possess certain genetic markers. These partnerships were meant to gradually prepare humanity for first contact. And I'm supposed to believe you picked me? A struggling writer with anxiety issues and a caffeine addiction? I didn't pick you. The universe did." She leaned forward, and the lights in her eyes sparkled. "Every story you've written, every dream of the stars, every inexplicable longing for something more, it was all leading you here." Nathan sank onto the couch, his mind reeling. "This is insane." "Is it?" Riley asked. "You've spent your whole life writing about the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary. Deep down, you've always known there was more to the universe than what you could see. That's why you came to this cabin, not to write, but to find answers." "I came here to finish my book," he protested, but even as he said it, he remembered all the nights he'd spent staring at the sky, feeling like something was calling to him. "Your next book," Riley said with a knowing smile, "is about a woman who falls from the stars. You started writing it 3 months ago, exactly when I arrived on Earth. That's not coincidence, Nathan. It's connection." A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and Nathan jumped. In that moment of distraction, Riley moved, faster than humanly possible, to stand before him. She held out her hand, and in her palm floated a small sphere of light. "I can prove everything I'm saying," she said softly. "But once you see, there's no going back." Your life will never be the same. Are you ready for that? Nathan stared at the light, thinking about his safe, predictable life, the deadlines, the meetings, the endless cycle of writing what was expected. Then he thought about all the stories burning inside him, the ones he'd been afraid to tell because they felt too real, too close to truths he didn't understand. He reached for the light. The sphere of light in Nathan's hand shattered into 1,000 points of starlight, each one expanding until the cabin disappeared. He found himself standing in what appeared to be a vast observatory, with windows that opened directly onto space. Earth hung below them, a blue marble wrapped in clouds. "This isn't real," he whispered, but the cold metal floor beneath his feet felt solid enough. "It's a memory," Riley explained, her silver skin glowing in the starlight. "My ship is cloaked in orbit. This is where I've been watching you from." Nathan turned slowly, taking in the alien technology that surrounded them. Holographic displays showed data in scripts he couldn't read, and strange creatures that looked like living crystal floated past, apparently serving as some kind of maintenance crew. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Out of everyone on Earth, why choose a writer who can barely keep his life together?" Riley's expression softened. "Because you see things others don't. Your latest manuscript, the one you abandoned, it describes exactly how our quantum navigation systems work. Knowledge your species isn't supposed to have for another century." "That was just imagination," Nathan protested. "Research and lucky guesses." "No," Riley said firmly. "It's genetic memory. Your great-grandmother wasn't killed in a car accident in 1963. She was a Valerian scientist who chose to remain on Earth. The stories she told your grandmother, the ones that inspired you to write, those weren't fairy tales. They were her trying to preserve our knowledge." Nathan's head spun. He thought about his grandmother's strange bedtime stories, the ones that had sparked his love of science fiction. The impossible technologies she described with such precision, the details that had always felt too real. "If that's true," he said slowly, "why reveal everything now? Why not just keep watching?" Riley's expression darkened. "Because we're running out of time. There's another faction of my people, the Purifiers, who believe human Valerian bonds are an abomination. They've discovered Earth, and they're coming to cleanse what they see as corruption." She met his gaze. "They'll start with the genetic lines that carry our blood." A chill ran down Nathan's spine. "How long do we have?" "Days. Maybe less." Riley waved her hand, and the holographic displays shifted to show a fleet of ships moving through space. "Once they arrive, they'll eliminate any human with Valerian DNA, along with anyone who tries to protect them. We need to evacuate the bloodline carriers before." She froze, her eyes widening. The observatory flickered around them, and suddenly they were back in the cabin. Riley rushed to one of her strange devices, which was emitting a high-pitched tone. "They're early," she breathed. "A scout ship just entered the atmosphere." She turned to Nathan, her expression urgent. "I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to trust me. We have to leave. Now." "Leave? I can't just," Nathan's protest was cut short by a sound like thunder, though the sky outside was clear. The cabin's windows rattled. "That's them scanning for Valerian energy signatures," Riley explained, already moving. She pressed something into his hand, a small crystal that hummed against his palm. "This will mask your genetic signature temporarily, but it won't fool them for long." Nathan stared at the crystal, then at his hands. They looked human enough, but now he wondered what other secrets might be hidden in his DNA. How many of his quirks and talents weren't actually his, but echoes of an alien ancestor? The thunder sound came again, closer this time. Riley grabbed a bag that seemed to hold more space than should be possible. "Nathan, please. I know you have questions. I know this isn't fair. But if we stay here, you'll die. Not just you, your sister, your cousins, anyone who carries even a trace of Valerian blood." I promised your great-grandmother I would protect her descendants, but I can't do that if you won't let me. Another boom, and this time the lights flickered. Nathan thought about his family, about his sister's daughter who was already showing signs of being a prodigy. Had that been genetic too? Okay, he said, surprising himself. What's the plan? Riley smiled, though her eyes remained worried. First, we get to my ship. Then we find the others like you, the dreamers, the inventors, the ones who see too clearly. After that. She hesitated. After that, you help me convince them that everything they thought they knew about themselves, about human history, about their place in the universe, it's all part of a much bigger story. And if they don't believe us? Then the purifiers win, and humanity loses a part of itself it didn't even know it had. She held out her hand. Ready to become part of that bigger story? Nathan took her hand, noting how natural it felt despite her alien skin. I've spent my whole life writing about extraordinary things happening to ordinary people. Guess it's time to live it instead. They ran out into the night just as another boom shook the mountains. Above them, the stars seemed to shift, and Nathan could have sworn he saw something massive moving through the clouds. The adventure he'd always dreamed of writing was about to become his reality, if they survived long enough to tell it. The Purifier scout ship carved through the night sky like a burning knife, its hull reflecting the moonlight with an ominous gleam. Nathan and Riley raced through the forest, their breaths coming in sharp bursts of white vapor. The crystal in Nathan's hand pulsed with increasing urgency, its protective field weakening with each passing moment. We're not going to make it to your ship, are we? Nathan gasped as they ducked behind a massive pine tree. The thunder of the scout ship's sensors made the ground tremble. Riley's star-filled eyes scanned the horizon. No. They're blocking my access. We need a new plan. She pulled out what looked like a compact mirror but displayed a three-dimensional map of the surrounding area. There's an old Valerian outpost about 3 miles east. If we can reach it, I might be able to send a distress signal. A beam of sickly green light swept through the trees behind them, and Nathan felt his skin crawl. The crystal in his hand grew hot. What happens if that light touches us? The purifiers believe in efficiency, Riley said grimly. Their scanning beam doesn't just detect Valerian DNA, it destroys it. Along with everything around it. As if to demonstrate her point, the beam caught a nearby tree. In seconds, it disintegrated into ash. Nathan swallowed hard. Right. East it is. They ran through the undergrowth, trying to stay in the shadows. Nathan's mind raced faster than his feet. You said my great-grandmother was Valerian. Does that mean I have abilities? Powers? The genetics are complicated, Riley explained as they vaulted over a fallen log. Most human Valerian hybrids manifest subtle traits, enhanced intuition, accelerated learning, creative insights that seem impossible. Your writing isn't just imagination, Nathan. You're remembering things your ancestors knew. An explosion rocked the forest behind them. The purifiers were getting closer. Nathan's lungs burned, but he pushed harder. So when I wrote about quantum navigation, you were accessing genetic memory, yes. That's why they want to eliminate the bloodlines. Too many of you are starting to remember. They reached a steep ravine, moonlight glinting off the rapids below. Riley checked her map. The outpost is on the other side. We have to cross. Nathan stared at the churning water. Please tell me we're not jumping. No, Riley said, pulling something from her bag that looked like silver rope. We're flying. The scout ship's engines roared overhead. Riley worked quickly, wrapping the rope around them both. This is a gravity tether. It will carry us across, but we'll be exposed. If they spot us. She met his eyes. Do you trust me? Nathan looked at her, this alien woman who had turned his world upside down in a matter of hours. He should have been terrified, should have been running in the opposite direction. Instead, he felt something else, recognition, like finding a missing piece of himself he hadn't known was gone. "Yes," he said, and meant it. Riley's smile was fierce. She pressed a sequence on her wrist device, and the rope began to glow. "Hold on to me. No matter what happens, don't let go." They lifted off the ground just as the scout ship's searchlight swept over their position. Nathan's stomach lurched as they soared across the ravine, the wind whipping around them. The ship's sensors let out a piercing shriek. "They've spotted us!" Riley shouted. The gravity tether sparked and sputtered as something hit it. They began to fall. Without thinking, Nathan reached out with his mind the way he did when writing, when the words seemed to flow from somewhere beyond himself. For a split second, he felt something respond, like catching an echo of a song he'd forgotten he knew. The gravity tether flared with renewed energy, propelling them the rest of the way across. They crashed onto the opposite bank as green beams sliced through the air around them. Riley stared at Nathan, her eyes wide. "You shouldn't have been able to do that. The ability to manipulate Valerian tech is supposed to be dormant in humans for at least 3 more generations." "Maybe I'm special," Nathan managed, trying to catch his breath. "You are." Riley's voice was soft despite the chaos around them. "More than you know." The moment was shattered by another explosion. They scrambled to their feet and ran into the dense forest. The outpost had to be close. Behind them, the scout ship launched what looked like glowing pods that burrowed into the ground. "Seeker drones," Riley explained as they ran. "They'll track us by our genetic signatures. The crystal won't fool them for long." "What happens when we reach the outpost?" "Best case. We contact my allies and evacuate. Worst case." She glanced at him. "We make our last stand and hope it means something." Nathan thought about his sister, his niece, all the others out there with Valerian blood who didn't know what was coming. "It will. Even if we fail, someone needs to tell the story. People need to know the truth." Riley's hand found his as they ran. "That's why you're my mate, Nathan Parker. You understand that some stories have to be lived before they can be told." They burst through the trees into a small clearing. In the center stood what appeared to be an ordinary boulder, until Riley pressed her hand against it. Lines of light spread from her touch, revealing the outline of a door. The seeker drones erupted from the ground behind them, their mechanical whirs filling the air. The scout ship descended, its weapons charging. They were out of time. "Whatever happens next," Riley said as she worked to open the door, "remember that none of this was a mistake. Finding you, showing you the truth, it was always meant to be this way." The door began to slide open, revealing a darkness filled with blinking lights. Nathan squeezed Riley's hand. "Then let's make it a story worth telling." The ancient Valerian outpost hummed to life around them, holographic displays flickering in the darkness. Nathan watched as Riley's fingers danced across control panels, her movements urgent. Outside, the seeker drones clawed at the door's energy shield, their metallic screams echoing through the chamber. "The communication array is damaged," Riley muttered, her star-filled eyes reflecting streams of alien data. "But there's something else here. Something old." She pressed her palm against a crystalline pillar, and the floor began to shift. A hidden compartment opened, revealing what looked like a massive engine core. Nathan felt it calling to him, the same way his stories did when they demanded to be written. "What is it?" "A quantum beacon," Riley breathed. "My people used them during the first wave of migration. One activation could signal every Valerian within 50 light-years." She turned to him, her expression grave. "But powering it would require an immense amount of energy. The only viable source would be..." "Would be what?" "Your genetic signature. Your hybrid DNA carries enough potential energy to activate it, but the process would burn out every trace of Valerian genetics in your system. You'd lose everything, the memories, the abilities, the connection." She swallowed hard. Including our bond. The Seeker drone's attacks intensified. The shield flickered dangerously. Nathan stared at the beacon, feeling its pull. If I don't do it, the purifiers will find every human Valerian hybrid on Earth. They'll eliminate our legacy, destroy any chance of your species reaching its full potential. Riley's voice cracked. But I won't ask you to sacrifice who you are. We can try to fight our way out, find another. The shield failed with a thunderous crack. Seeker drones poured through the breach, their weapons charging. Riley raised her hand, generating a smaller barrier, but it wouldn't last long. Nathan thought about his grandmother's stories, about all the impossible dreams that had shaped his life. He thought about his niece, already showing signs of something extraordinary. Then he looked at Riley, this impossible woman who had shown him the truth about himself. Will it hurt? He asked. Riley's eyes widened. Nathan, no. You don't have to. Will it hurt? She hesitated. Yes. But you'll survive. You'll just be human. He managed a smile. I've had practice at that. The drones breached Riley's barrier. In the distance, they could hear the purifier ship preparing its main weapons. Nathan stepped toward the beacon, but Riley caught his arm. Wait, she said, and pulled him into a kiss. For a moment, he felt everything, the vastness of space, the song of distant stars, the thread of destiny that had brought them together. Then she pressed something into his hand. So you don't forget this was real. It was a small crystal, similar to the one that had protected him but filled with swirling lights. What is it? My memories. Not enough to maintain the bond, but enough to write the story. Her smile was bittersweet. Make it a good one. Nathan clutched the crystal and stepped into the beacon's chamber. As the quantum energies began to rise around him, he looked at Riley one last time. Will I remember you? Some stories, she said softly, are written in more than memory. The beacon activated. Pain exploded through Nathan's body as his Valerian DNA was converted to pure energy. He felt his connection to that other world burning away, felt the memories of stars and songs fading like a dream at dawn. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was Riley, her silver skin blazing like a supernova as she channeled the beacon's power into a signal that would save their worlds. Then everything went white. 3 months later, Nathan sat at his desk in his New York apartment, staring at the blank document on his screen. The crystal Riley had given him pulsed softly beside his laptop, its lights dancing like distant stars.